This is 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's news and talk.
Thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed base ranks with the
So I
simulated
know a
wood
guy
paneling,
who knows a guy at the
electric
mask shop in
fireplace,
Vespucci.
and the
Thought
painting
the
of
Connect
dogs
would come in
playing
handy.
poker. You're locked. That greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Welcome to Coast to Coast AM, the very best in late-night talk radio. I'm Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie. And tonight, this morning, I'm coming to you live from the home studio of Thornhill, just north of Toronto. Coming up in hour one of the most captivating narratives at the intersection of history and mystery, brought to us by none other than Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Her controversial claims about her great-grandfather's presidency involve secret
Yo, you need a boat storage? We still need transport to reach the cargo ship. Now take your pick and tow it back to the yard.
Our understanding of the past century. President Eisenhower, a central figure in mid-20th century politics, is often remembered for his military and presidential leadership. However, Laura brings forward a different perspective, discussing his lesser-known encounters with extraterrestrial entities, particularly with an alien referred to as Valiant Thor. According to Laura, these meetings weren't just diplomatic niceties, but were part of a series of profound interactions that hinted at a cosmic agenda hidden from the public eye. Adding layers to this complex narrative, Laura discusses shocking revelations about the events post-World War II, challenging the accepted historical outcomes. She claims that, contrary to popular belief, the Nazis had not been fully vanquished, but had instead formed a clandestine alliance with extraterrestrial forces. These alliances allegedly enabled them to continue exerting influence behind the scenes, wielding advanced technology obtained through their extraterrestrial partners. Laura points to the massive UFO flyover in 1952, known as the Washington Flap, where a fleet of unidentified flying objects displayed overwhelming technological superiority with the nation's capital. According to her, this event was not just a show of force, but part of a more extensive demonstration that led President Harry Truman to sign what she describes as an unconditional surrender to these Nazi extraterrestrial forces, marking a pivotal yet hidden moment in global power dynamics. As fantastical as these claims may sound, they find a backdrop in the context of the Cold War era secrecy and the birth of modern UFO mythology. Laura argues that these incidents were carefully obfuscated in what she terms the extraterrestrial military-industrial complex, a shadowy confluence of earthly and alien interests aiming to manipulate global events and public perception. Tonight, Laura will also discuss how these revelations have shaped her mission to promote what she calls the divine feminine Gaia Sophia energy, aimed at counteracting the deceit she believes pervades the current global power structure. Her life's work, inspired by the hidden truths she's uncovered, focuses on enlightening others about the depths of these conspiracies and fostering a spiritual awakening to overcome them. Could there be a real history that's been hidden under layers of secrecy and misdirection? Hours 3 and 4, open lines, when I promise to help shepherd you through the spectral realms and ghastly tales for 2 hours of night's deepest dark. As the clock chimes the late hour, we throw open the gates to the unknown and invite you, the solitary wanderer and keeper of secrets, to share your encounters with the ethereal, the inexplicable, the downright phantasmal. Have you perhaps, during your nocturnal wanderings, glimpsed the wraith-like visages of those long departed? These apparitions, so elusive yet so vivid, driven through the peripheries of our vision, beckoning with a spectral hand to tales unfinished, love unrequited, vengeance unclaimed. Share with us these visitations. Let us peer together into the abyss, or maybe you've been haunted by the spectral fingers of communication from the world beyond the veil. Messages that slip through the cracks of our reality, manifesting in whispered dreams, moving objects with unseen hands, or the eerie static of electronic voices. These communications, are they comfort or curse? Tonight, the airwaves are yours to explore these haunted happenings and more. Laura Eisenhower reveals her great-grandfather, President Eisenhower's meetings with extraterrestrials. Next, welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather by the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. I'm Richard Serra, sitting in for George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Why don't you stay a while? Laura Eisenhower is a master astrologer and the great-granddaughter to 5-star General and 34th President Dwight D. Eisenhower. As a child, Laura intimately sensed the resistance forces working around her and embarked on her own journey into the underworld, only to discover her own true frequency, and overcame the many challenges of life by the remembrance of the divine feminine energies in union with the masculine, which is encoded in our DNA. Her experiences included extreme wilderness training and an attempted recruitment into living on the planet on Mars as part of the secret space program, which revealed to her many things. She declines to stay true to her purpose here on Earth. Her new book is titled Opening the Truth Frequency into the Unified Group. Laura Eisenhower, welcome to Coast AM. How was it?
Nice to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. How did you first become aware of your great-grandfather's contacts with extraterrestrials?
Oh gosh, I think I knew before I came in. There was a lot that I was being made aware of at a very young age, but it slowly got more and more defined over the course of many years. I felt his presence through childhood and the presence of other beings. I felt like I was being prepared, and I was always opened up to this bigger picture on a galactic, multidimensional level. And so I figured, okay, there's something about him that has to do with that. And of course, I'm processing who he was in this physical world as a president, as a general, and was just navigating the journey, being exposed to this in my family all the time. My aunts and uncles and my mother being so close to him and having a very different childhood than I had, and just learning so much about him through my grandfather, John S.D. Eisenhower. There's just so much love and this incredible energy going on that I just felt such a connection to the spirit. And along the way, there's connection with him that kept finding me through synchronicity. And I was always thinking about the out there kid and just kind of connecting to dimensions beyond this one. And I just started to feel a lot into just our connection and how that ties into these visitations, especially with Balthor. What really struck me was some of the rumors and what I was hearing about, like everybody has read about, or a lot of people, when they start to dive into the subject, that he signed a treaty with the Greys in 1954 called the Greada Treaty. And when I first came across that information, I was very curious. I'm like, okay, I gotta explore this. And when I first saw it was in a newspaper that, it was a joke newspaper, the Weekly World News. And yeah, and I started looking for one when I was like 9 years old, and I'm like, well, there's a lot more to this, and I know that this is a part of my past to cover. And so yeah, just a series of synchronicities that led me what I put in my book about how it actually wasn't in the Clinton treaties, it was MK12 that did it behind the staff. So of course the Mars equipment and everything that I learned about that and how I got out of it, opened my eyes up to what really took place in that administration, what these contacts were all about, and what the cover-up we are faced with, that we would call like maybe narratives, that we want to discuss the question and dig a little bit deeper because there's a lot more to the story than I first thought. So,
All right. Well, let's go back to February 20th, 1954, and your great-grandfather is on vacation, Palm Springs, California. He supposedly has a dental emergency. Instead, makes his secret nocturnal trip to nearby Air Force Base, where it's alleged he met with, I believe it's two extraterrestrials, two Nordics, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if that's the story that you read in the Blue World News, but I mean, how did that story play in the rest of the family? Did they kind of laugh it off, but you thought, well, no, there's something more in there? How was it viewed by your relatives?
well, I couldn't just like take it off the shelf, and I knew it was a joke newspaper. But I just remember just so clearly just being that young, and I didn't say anything at first, and then later on, more in my teenage years, more when I just really had to talk about the fact that I felt some kind of targeting on me, and then later on, when it got more and more confirmed, I tried to bring up these topics. It was a little bit later that I brought up any thought of targeting when I actually was listening, and then my mom was definitely exposed to that, saying that's a partner and this and that. But yeah, I bring up these topics, and it was definitely, I wouldn't say laughed at, but it was like the subject would change real quick. And when I would get that family gatherings, Thanksgiving, especially that was every year, up until my granddad, John, I spun stress. We also had family reunions. I was always the one like, all right, everybody, let's talk about DCs and Eisenhower. And I remember Doug telling David and Julie just bringing up Val Florida, and then they immediately started to talk about just something different. And I didn't feel like they were hiding anything. I feel like it needed to fit a generation. It was dangerous for my aunts and uncles.
Well, that's understandable.
Yeah.
And what is your understanding of what happened on February 20th, 1954 at Edwards Air Force Base? Was that when he met the Nordics? How many of them were there? What was discussed?
Hello, this is 911. What emergency service do you require? Thank you. Police officers are en route to your current location.
I also question it. I'm more questioning the first contact because I have a lot of confidence in what Dan Cooper told me because it connects a lot more dots and it makes a lot more sense. So from what Secret Secret said was that the first contact was with the Nordics, and they warned us grade, and they wanted us to take down and not use nuclear weapons. And being very vulnerable after the Second World War, the Cold War, and not having weapons wasn't something that they could easily just agree upon. And when they were in meetings about that, then all of a sudden the British showed up, and they were I wouldn't say necessarily the story said forced into signing a treaty, but there was an agreement that proposed that a certain number of individuals that would be taken and then returned, and they would exchange the ability to abduct for genetic material and monitoring us or watching us or giving more knowledge about us, we would get advanced technology in return. So what I found out is that really didn't happen. When I asked along the way, the most information I could get out was that we actually did go to a dentist appointment. And I remember my mom saying very confidently, and that's where it wasn't laughed off, but it was brushed off. It was sort of like, we're just not going to touch this. And there was only so much that they knew, so you can't really go down those rabbit holes. And they knew that I was going to use a family member that would. Eventually it got real obvious to them. So I think they were kind of like relieved, but they couldn't really jump in and be a part of it. It was like, okay, just somebody.
You said you You said he did go to the dentist appointment, so he did both. He went to a dentist appointment and then he went to Edwards Air Force Base?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I'm there, so my mom, was very connected and close, said that he went to a dentist appointment. If he did go to Edwards Air Force Base, there's whistleblowers that say so-and-so happened there, right? But
Suit yourself.
a number of individuals that have come forward recently, and researchers that have studied this topic for a while, including Lisa Renee, energeticsynthesis.com, who's really knowledgeable about Black history and the Guardian. If they're also that MJ12 did it behind his back, and an unconditional surrender agreement took place in 1952, and ICE had no legal ability to be able to meet with any ETs, nor negotiate with them, that there was absolutely no way that this, could have taken place. And I go into that a lot in my book. And he's very adamant about making this point really hit home. Because I'm like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? I'm not just going with what he's telling me. And that's why you'll see close to the book where he's like, how many times do I need to tell you? Like, as I already mentioned before, MJ12 has the only legal authority to sign treaties or agreements with ET alien species according to the terms of unconditional surrender. So if it was the Nordic, he says South Shore was in communication before what we hear about the Pentagon.
Buyer wants an airdrop. The product's loaded and waiting at the helipad.
Warned about the Nordics and the Greys, and that the Nordics were in bed with the Nazis, and they were part of this alliance. And these are false scenarios, part of the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance propaganda to put a bunch of plants in and confuse and muddy the water. And but this is not what whistleblowers have said. I think some of them are very credible. So what I present in the book is really for the reader to discern, because it's a really difficult thing to get to the bottom of. And what makes sense to me is if there was a meeting with the Nordics and he was there, he wouldn't have been able to make any agreements. And then when the Greys came, he wasn't able to make any agreements. And from what I've come to understand, this is from multiple sources, that the treaty with the Greys originated in the 40s, and that ET contact with the government had already taken place in the 1930s.
So these treaties allow the Greys to abduct a certain number of human beings. It was kind of a non-interference. You stick to your knitting, we'll do our abductions. It was did they have to provide the identities of the people they were abducting to the U.S. government? Was that part of the arrangement?
Yeah, that would have been part of the arrangement, but supposedly they started this sort of exchange started 10 years previous, and they're supposedly renewed every 10 years. But this is through 300 organizations, through MJ12, through this group of individuals that had hidden behind the narrative of ISIS doing it. And
so your great-grandfather had no power. He had no authority, no power. He was expected to be a glorified ribbon cutter. He arrives in the White House, and someone sits him down and says, listen, Ike, the Nazis actually won the war, and your predecessor, President Truman, surrendered to them unconditionally, so you just sit here and make nice and don't make any waves.
I don't think that's, maybe exactly how it happened. I think Balfour has to come in, because it's literally impossible to navigate this without having some level of assistance. And the assistance and advising of Balfour made all the difference in the world, because, okay, if the unconditional surrender agreement took place, Eisenhower was aware of it. Every president since Truman has been aware of it. But what he did is covertly set up the positive military forces and attempted to invade Area 51 in 1954, which is the same year that he supposedly signed a treaty with the Greys. So why would he be attacking Dulce underground base if he signed a treaty with the Greys and had some sort of agreement that later they say that treaty was broken and the Greys deceived him? How is that he would actually invade Dulce if that happened the same year, right? So one needs to look at all of this other information because it doesn't seem very likely that he was just going to sit back and be that way. But the reason he couldn't tell the public is because if he told the public, it just wouldn't have been possible to set up these positive military branches in the way that he successfully did, which are still in operation today, like the White House and the ICC, not the ICC, excuse me, the USMC Special Section called ICE Force, and Valspar helping to petition to the Guardian to intervene on our behalf without saving the day. And that has to do with an outer barrier that was put around the planet to corner them, the Nazi Greco Alliance, which is beyond just the Nazi Party. And this is where the manipulation of the Gagarin Mafia and how it's on both sides of war wants us to just keep fighting about all of this forever.
All right, there's a lot to unpack here, but I don't want to get too far afield here. So let's take a time out. Laura Eisenhower is here. We're talking about her great-grandfather, President Eisenhower, his meetings with extraterrestrials, his attempt, I guess, to get out from under this Nazi ET alliance. The Americans signed an unconditional surrender in 1952, and we'll come back and get further into this. Taking us into the break, Irma Thomas, anyone who knows what love is, right here on Coast to Coast AM.
Like BioNight training and expertise to help out into the 60s of 5.
That's the second highest on the scale, which is known as 5 times August.
Now, future guest host, Richard Settle.
Hey, welcome back. Sitting in for George Norrie, this is Brad Skistimas from Dallas, Texas, otherwise known as 5 times August, and Ain't No Rock and Roll. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Space Weather Prediction Center has bumped up this weekend's geomagnetic storm watch to a level G4. That's the second highest on the scale. The change comes as solar activity continues at high levels and at least 4 normal mass ejections propelled toward Earth. According to NOAA's SWPC, to have a watch at this level is rare, but it is indeed an issue where there's a high likelihood that several CMEs will reach Earth and create highly elevated geomagnetic activity. And as we've reported lately, it's been pretty busy in space within the last week, but most recently, numerous high-level solar flares and their associated coronal mass ejections from several sunspot regions have been increasing, which has also upped the potential effects of this solar activity. Late Friday into Saturday, these events may not only affect space, but also Earth in terms of our satellite communication systems. And yes, whether auroras could be visible. You can check out the story in the news section of the coasttocoastam.com. Hey, have you checked out Coast to Coast Paranormal Podcast Network yet? Here's producer Tom Danheiser to tell us more. Hey, Tom.
Richard, how are you? How is your lovely wife? And how are your ducks?
All great. Although the female duck is hopping fences lately, so we're busy chasing around the neighborhood.
They like, how high is the fence?
Well, we just got, we repurposed our hockey boards that we had for our hockey rink into a fence. They're not high enough, evidently.
Okay, I have to tell you something before I start this podcast network. If I didn't like you before, I really like you now. You have a hockey rink?
We put up a hockey rink in the backyard. Didn't I tell you about this?
No, that is so cool.
Oh, it's so much work, though, Tom. I can't begin to tell people.
It's hockey. It doesn't matter.
That's true.
Well, thanks for having me on, folks. We'd like to invite you to listen to the Paranormal Podcast Network. Very simple to get to. If you listen to your podcasts on your phone,
There's so much happening.
Laura Eisenhower, master astronomer Eisenhower, and her. And we are back with Laura Eisenhower, master astrologer, great-granddaughter to 5-star General and 34th President Dwight D. Eisenhower, and her new book is titled Awakening the True Frequency into the Unifying Field. There's so much coming at us, Laura, that it's almost enough to make one's head spin here. But let's just back up a little bit. You mentioned Valspar. And some may not be familiar with the stranger at the Pentagon and that whole story around this extraterrestrial. So just tell us everything we need to know about Valiant Thor and what his connection was to your great-grandfather.
Well, Valiant Thor supposedly went rogue, and there were non-intervention agreements, but there needed to be some kind of communication before things got too far. Because in 1947, as we know, projects like Project Paperclip, the mission of Admiral Byrd, which was not successful, and all these different things happening, it became incredibly overwhelmingly obvious that the infiltration was going to get absolutely out of hand. So his presence, being from Venus, with his crew, Victor 1, has played such an immense role, I feel. Grant Strangers wrote a book called The Stranger at the Pentagon, talks more about his meeting with Eisenhower and Nixon in like 59, 1960, and how he put on VIP status for 3 years, and they were discussing, how Balfour could assist this administration in helping humanity. And I really feel that Eisenhower's final speech was influenced greatly by Balfour, in the sense that Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex, and he said that we need to be an aware and knowledgeable citizenry. And so I feel that all of this took place because Balfour's last meeting with the president, according to Frank Strangers, did not reach any lasting results. Eisenhower wanted to let the world know about the proposed plan, that the Secretary of Defense, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, and the military chief of staff were opposed to his suggestion. So if that's the case,
Excuse me, Laura, but what was pardon the interruption, but what was Val's plan? And presumably we're talking about his plan for the United States to get from us out from under the yoke of the Nazi and extraterrestrials.
Yes, so he advised ICE for years before he was put on VIP status, specifically about how to defeat the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance and end their dominion over humanity. And the Venetians, Commander Balfour, who is from the planet Venus, are very hard-based. Frank Strangers says they're Christians, and they were adamantly opposed to violence. So this was going to involve coming together in unity and understanding how we can begin to switch on dormant DNA and overcome these control agendas, and how the dark technologies have engineered artificial timelines, engineered weather, and all the different tactics that are being used on the human race. I feel like this collaboration would have been all about the wake-up call in a much more direct way. And because it all got shut down, I feel it helped to influence Eisenhower's speech in saying we need to be aware and knowledgeable citizenry. We really need to dig deep. And when we look at why 1962 is so significant, 1962 is when the Bilderberg Group was created to take the decision-making about the alien problem and other international issues out of the hands of government. And this is how this group evolved into the secret world government. And so with about 20 levels, now 28, during that time above the president, this is where he was not able to do what a president should be able to do. And so with the help of Balfour, his position was to advise Eisenhower, help him to set up the positive branches of the military, and then come in and stay on VIP status to see if they would be able to get further in this collaboration to really help awaken the masses. And that's when it all kind of got shut down, but Balfour didn't leave. Supposedly there's a bunch of motherships stationed all around the planet, and connected to Val and his crew. But Lake Mead is a well-known place that Sector 1 supposedly has been stationed, and maybe is still to this day.
This is Valiant Thor's correct?
Yes, Sector 1.
By Lake Mead. Right. Okay. So your great-grandfather then, with that famous speeches he's leaving the White House, where the military-industrial complex, he was desperately trying to let the American public know, listen, we surrendered to the Nazis. He wanted to tell, but he couldn't, so he was trying to reveal it, I don't know, in a cryptic fashion, or... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Totally cryptic. And yeah, in the top of the government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex. And we should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals. So the security and liberty may prosper together. And this is what we're dealing with. Where he was manipulated as well, I feel he really woke up to it. When we see a lot of false history, a lot of rewritten history, as far as what we see took place, not everybody's going to agree with what took place during the war. So I feel, part of my mission and my role has to do with this particular time in history. I was recruited to an alternate 3 scenario, and
what does that mean, an alternative 3 scenario? Sorry, what do you mean by an alternative 3 scenarios?
So it was proposed to the Eisenhower administration that in the event of cataclysm, that there would be backup plans. And that was also presented to the Eisenhower administration. So I feel, from what I've learned from remote viewers who have worked on me and looked into all of this, that I was a part of the group, or the being from Venus, that helped to warn him and guide him in his administration. I've been told that more than once, so I take that with a grain of salt. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, because when I came in, I'm like, all right, I know, like, there's something going on here, and I had some kind of agreement. But it was, it wasn't just Venus. It just, there's more to the picture than all that. So, and that there would be a migration of advanced souls that would come in, and we would all work together and bring about this awakening. And so they intercepted that information, and that's why they tried to take me off planet. And I think the agreement was that that was presented during his administration, and because I had a connect with Val and Venus, that I would come in and agree to come in human form, so that when they tried to take me off to Mars, I would have the insight and awareness to call it out. Because the thing is, the separate military branches and what he put into place has been largely secret, but there's a lot of disclosure and a lot of that being revealed now. But during this time that we've all been navigating our paths in our own different ways, there's been a lot of targeting and a lot of usage of things like looking glass technology to be able to keep check and track, how the office.
We'll come back around to the looking glass, but I want to get into your great-grandfather's attempts to sort of fight back against the Nazi Draco Alliance. You mentioned Ike's Force. Tell me a little bit more on Ike's Force. What was it all about? How did he form it?
So I've asked a lot of questions about that, and this is not the easiest. During me trying to get to the bottom of everything when I wasn't there, right?
Just give us the broad strokes. Give me the broad strokes.
Yes. So, the U.S. Marine Corps called Special Section, the USMC Special Section, is otherwise known as Ike's Force. And Randy Kramer was a part of that. And basically, this force was to help counteract the Super Soldier program. And what it did was it took individuals that were part of Project Mannequin and Monarch programming to turn it around, to be able to offset the targeting and the creation of super soldiers in order to direct military forces into a positive direction. So there were super soldier programs that were actually benevolent that were helping to play a role that would be able to go off planet and be a part of these secret space programs, but in a more benevolent way. So when you look at like Darkfleet and a lot of the different levels of the secret space programs, there needed to be something that was a military force that could operate on that level, not just on a ground level. So the USMC Special Section they chose the Marine Corps because of their camaraderie, and it just seemed like this was the best group of individuals to begin to work with. But there's some kind of link with that, with something called Project Moonshadow and Randy Cramer's experience. So I have it all really well written in the book. When I try and explain it, it doesn't flow as easily because I'm not in touch with Randy like I used to be. But basically, this would be the part of
You closed that deal, all right. Wiring the funds right away. LJT.
Ended up happening with the rogue aspect of the secret space program in order to establish an Earth Alliance that would work with the Guardians, and there would be advising going on with also the White House.
Okay, well, before we get to the Guardians and the White House, let me see if I understand this. So, during the Second World War, we have the Nazis and their Axis and the Axis powers versus the Allies fighting on land, sea, and in the air. So, if I'm understanding you correctly, the Nazi Draco Alliance created the super soldiers, and they're off planet now. They're fighting on Mars, on the moon, and Ike creates Ike's force to fight the super soldiers off planet. So in other words, it's almost like a continuance of the Second World War, but now it's in outer space. Is that sort of what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the basic premise of all this is to keep the MK-12 boys in check. To be able to put a military unit in these areas in order to know what they were doing. And there were battles, just like there were...
In case you were worried about selling these arms and them not getting you.
In 1954, I invaded Dulce, and we lost that battle. And then he tried to invade Area 51, and that didn't go so well. So I would imagine that Ice Force was trying to do the same thing with what was happening on planet and how that influences us here. And so often we're dealing with things like human trafficking and them recruiting kids from the gifted and talented parts of the school system that they take kids into, and all the violence and the military justice, and how the girls ball and the shadow government and state family are all part of it. And the positive pieces and having this bigger picture big presence going on. I'm sorry, I run my book.
No, let me ask you about another, special force that your great-grandfather put together. These were called the White Hats. Is this similar to Ike's force, or is it another?
It's a different group. And, okay, hold on a second. Yeah, so the White Hats, I just want to get the comment with that. I mean, it's not like this is the first administration or the first individual that's done something like this. What has been told to me is that the Battle of Dulce, which we hear about in 1959, happened in 1954, which is when we hear Dulce grew out on TV. Anyway, someone found U.S. Special Forces troops engaged against the Great Forces then, and nearly half of them lost their lives in that action. So I also established the White Hats, the first of which were Texan U.S. generals and admirals, and that's where the name White Hats came from, Ike White Hat. And they're the ones that brought Ronald Reagan into their fold, and on, moving forward, right? And then this, Trump, and how we hear about the connection there, those are all things to look at and consider.
We're going to, sorry to interrupt, we're approaching the top of the hour, so we'll take it now. When we come back, we'll get into the Guardians, the Nazi Draco Alliance's base of operation. I've heard, for example, that he bombed the Nazi base in New Schwabenland. You can verify or disabuse us of that. You can. Or Eisenhower State's Witness Sears Sheriff Bell taking this in a break with us.
Make amazing happen. Find out more at Sports People. Key witness Michael Cohen stops couple.
Sitting in for George Norrie. Say hello on X at Richard Serra. SY, because I love you, RC double T's. A diligent Loch Ness webcam watcher has once again spotted something unusual at the iconic Scottish site in the form of a rather sizable anomaly that can be seen across the previous site, reportedly made by Virtual Monster Hunter Ian Fatahagen as he was observing the nest on the net live stream this past Wednesday morning. Check out the video for yourself. That's Carousel on Coast to Coast AM.com. Tonight on Coast to Coast AM, I'll be back in the air chair. That's we will, as I did my years of experience in the realm of hide and bringing real world authenticity to his fiction narratives. He joins me to discuss and advocating about financial elites to take everyone's assets, including stocks, bonds, bank deposits, and intellectual property. It's called The Great Taking. In the second half, Chris Stiles is an independent UFO researcher best known for his work on classic UFO cases in Atlantic Canada. He shares update on the Shag Harbor incident, where in 1965, during a massive wave of worldwide UFO sightings, residents of Shag Harbor witnessed a huge UFO crash into the bay, where 3 Royal Canadian Mounties rushed in and floated before the sinking. That's coming up tonight on Coast to Coast. Take.com with yours truly in the air check. All right, back to Mark's conversation with Laura Eisenhower as she discusses her great-grandfather, President Dwight Eisenhower's meetings with extraterrestrials. And we'll find that conversation at this time on Coast to Coast.
Like many of us, you might think identity theft will never happen.
LegacyBox.com/grandfather presentation. Laura Eisenhower is here. The new book is Awakening the Truth Frequency in the Unified Frequencies, published by CCC Publishing. Our good friend Brad Olson. Brad Olson. I was speaking with Brad earlier this week, actually, and about the Antarctic and the Nazi base, the under ice secret base in Schwabenland. And it was telling me that according to one account, anyway, your great-grandfather, President Eisenhower, welcomed to Schwaber. What can you tell us about that? Is there any truth to that?
I don't know. I wish I was there. I mean, I trying to get as much information as possible. And I have to just correction when Val Thor arrived. It was 1967, but he had advised the administration previous to that, so I just wanted to correct that date. But as far as the scare, I only know really that from other researchers. I wouldn't be able to say much except for to nod my head and like with an open mind.
Okay, so
I would more getting on that, but
the idea of the Nazis surviving the Second World War, perhaps even what we know, for example, that while the German armies surrendered, the Third Reich never did. Yes, would have been Hitler's successor.
Okay, let me see if there's anything on the to-do list.
Officially surrendered.
And that, I believe, is everything sold. Next time you see those weapons, they'll be on the news.
Joseph Barrow wrote a book called The Nazi International.
So, here's what we're going to do. For once in our lives, we're going to refuse to be gentrifiers.
What would you say to people who are listening and might be thinking, wow, this is just too much. The Nazis won the war, they formed an alliance with extraterrestrials, and, you know, this is basically, you know, what is why we're living the way we do. Everything ties back to that unconditional surrender to the Nazis in 1952. What do you say when they say this is too much, or I don't believe it?
I know, I mean, it's just something that it scares people, but it really does make a lot of sense. If people do the research about 1952 with the Bilderbergs and the three-letter organizations and MG12, and I mean, there's just so much to research. And then with that, in about 1952, it's like, oh, there are all these other things, make a lot more sense. Like the paperclip, the Philadelphia Project, in terms of the surrender agreement, and the fact that this is when they say that the trade agreement took place, 100,000 U.S. citizens per year in exchange for the technology from the grade. That was supposedly like in 1952 as well. And that also, like I said, the agreements and alliances took place previous to that. So that had been going on, starting in the 1930s and then with this, renewal. But when we hear about it after the paperclip and some judicial surrender agreement, all of a sudden the president doesn't have any power, and they are spending a lot of our tax dollars and a lot of money on the propaganda and the narrative and the Project Mockingbird and the false news, false media, geoengineering, and all these things that are just like more things in deception and war on consciousness and spiritual warfare and indoctrination in the school system, and all these things that if we think we won the war, we're going to be relatively unnoticed, and it's going to be protecting these things and just feeling, well, learning history books who won the war, why question it? And then they're easily able to make whoever they want to look bad and rewrite history to make Eisenhower look bad. And I've gotten a lot of hate my whole life just being related to him, and it's like, wow. And I've been open to how, I find this information through synchronicities and connecting dots with other researchers and just hoping to be a part of this larger conversation. So I just share in the book with everything I found out, even include the things that doesn't talk about what happened in 1952. I pretty much excited about it in 1954. But laying it all out, I think, is the best thing, because by the time you get to the end of it, I think you will notice the common thread that are really pointing towards the fact that this actually did happen. And I'm not being biased when people think that I am. I'm here for truth. And that's kind of what the whole idea of the name of the book is.
Great work! For once in my life, I'm not going to be responsible for the death of an interesting neighborhood.
The biggest topic being used on is the divide and conquer, and also looking to the wrong people as being the bad guys, and continually supporting and consenting to the ones that pretend they're looking out for us. And this type of science and psychology and manipulation that they were like studying and mastering in many ways previous to coming into this country, where they were put in positions of power through paperclips, and their identity got whitewashed. And that was a part of the unconditional surrender agreement, was to whitewash the names of the Nazis. So that alone, with anything knowing about paperclips, should be enough to open to this.
So who is looking out for us in terms of the extraterrestrials? So you mentioned the Nazi alliance with the Greys and the Nordics and the when you say the Dracos, does that refer to the reptilians?
Yeah. So I mean, not all reptilians and obviously not all Nordics, right? But the alliance. Yeah.
Right.
And
So who's on our side? The Guardians, right? The Guardians. Who are the Guardians? Which ET civilizations are they, and how are they attempting to help us?
Right. Okay. So just real quick, the connection with the Nazis and the Nordics. The Nordics sold the Nazis a city in their nation, one of 7 nations in the inner earth. That city is called New Berlin. So Val was warning about the Nordics and the Greys. That sort of helps us to see. And that's a really tough, when you think that something is true and then all of a sudden it might not be, like you said, your head begins to spin. My head's been spinning. I'm like rabbit hole exhausted kind of. But anyway, Balfour was able to contact the Sphere Being Alliance, which are the Guardians. And the Guardians, particularly finding out more about the Guardians through somebody like Lisa Renee, energeticsynthesis.com, will help us to understand more the Guardian presence. And so they are very, very higher dimensional energy, connecting to the higher dimensions of like 13, 14, 15, right? And there's so much to care about that. But Val Thor told Ike about them in 1957. That's the year that, he was put on VIP status. And Val Thor volunteered to petition the Guardians on humanity's behalf at Ike's request, also in 1957. But it wasn't until 2014 that they put this outer barrier around the planet. So they're different.
The Guardians put an outer barrier around the planet to what? To blockade so that the Nazis couldn't escape, or what?
Yes, so they couldn't escape and they couldn't bring any more in. So essentially, so they would be cornered. Is how I have been told. I mean, what I've been told and what. So they put an impenetrable outer barrier. It's considered an 8th force energy field around our solar system, and they did this in 2014. And so he was the person that attempted to convince the Sphere Being Alliance, this is Eisenhower, that humanity was worth freeing from the ICC Nazi Draco Alliance's dominion over us. And when he was told about this migration of souls, and me being, one of them to come into the family, and a whole bunch of us. And the things that he says in the cryptic messages in his speech, it really is about us waking up. It isn't about the government. And a lot of his quotes really express that. And so I feel, this outer barrier is very much like us connecting with our higher self. Our dormant DNA connects to, all these different levels. And I feel that we're being saved not from something outside of us, but something from within us, something that we're beginning to awaken. And as we move through this window period called ascension, we're dissolving fences in our DNA and that surround the planet. And I feel this outer barrier is offsetting this net that we've been encased in. And where these dark technologies of engineered artificial timelines, it's like literally like, instead of us being enslaved, it's literally cornering them so that we can expose them, and we won't be overwhelmed by more coming in. And as the White House and other positive branches of the military begin to, as they have been, taking care of what's going on in underground bases and, helping to bring more information forward, we are going to claim victory. And Dan told me the Guardians wouldn't have bothered if they knew that we were capable of succeeding in this, but they're not going to do it through force or violence. There's a lot about the education that is going to need to come into school systems, new schools being built, the whole new earth kind of, when people talk about new earth energy, it's more like new structures being built, pulling our attention away from the systems that are, inverted and attempting to enslave us further. That we would be given the information and the technology to rebuild on our own terms.
But how do we get from out from under? I understand, of the awakening and so forth, and heightened consciousness and so forth. But the Nazis and their ET allies, they've got the weaponry, they have the technology. Are we actively fighting them now in underground bases? Is there a war going on in the heavens underneath our feet?
Yeah, I mean, like people to really talk to and who know more about this would be like Michael Jaco and all these folks, right? As far as where it is now, I am not totally certain of what is actually going on now. I have been warned that there is a lot of false information about executions happening and all these spaces are being cleared out. Yes, there are operations, but is it to the degree that we're hearing? It's definitely happening though. The Guardians have been around for a while. Before that outer barrier was put into place. The petitioning of the Guardians, took place, in the 50s, and Dan, has been working with them and been in contact with them since 1975. And so the Guardians assured him that we would prevail in the Earth Alliance's war with the IC Nazi Draco Alliance. So the Earth Alliance that is playing a big role is doing that, and White House as well, and Ike Force, and and it's, greater awakening. And it wasn't just him setting all this up. I mean, there were other people that were absolutely wanting the same thing, of course. And those that have been compromised, that were considered black hats,
are you looking after this passed out guy? Well, from what I've been told, this isn't so much a taxi service as an ambulance ride, okay? Get him to the hospital.
Sort of what I spoke about was the super soldier program. So I'm
what about the abduction? What about the okay, sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, yeah. So how we get out from underneath it is to recognize that their dark technology needs us to be in a low vibration for it to even work. It's all about mind control. It's all about social engineering, weather manipulation. And so what we get through the media and the indoctrination and social engineering and divide and conquer tactics is that our vibration is low, and in that lower vibration and energy, we're easier assimilated into AI, where the things that we inhale in our bodies and what gets into our system forms an antenna, and what we've been breathing in from, chemtrails links into this 5G and technological manipulation. So we have to raise our vibration above it and the override frequency, and there's everything happening on the planet in this shift time to help us to reach this higher level, recognizing that we're the more advanced technology that can weaponize all of this, because we can keep our minds free and our consciousness clear. We will override. So
this is what you call the divine feminine Gaia Sophia energy.
Hello, this is 911. What emergency service do you require? Thank you. Police officers are en route to your current location.
Grid network was manipulated with reversive technology to harvest and siphon our energy in order to then be able to engineer these artificial timelines that require us really looking outside of ourselves, continually falling into the trickery of the problem reaction solution, not knowing, who some of these players are, the deeper levels, of what really takes place in the shadow government and within these families. So, understanding that is going to help us to see, just like we would want to, know if, not always compared to this, but you see red flags in a relationship, right? You don't want to believe it, but then once it becomes obvious, you don't want to be there anymore. And some people are so afraid of what's so obvious that, they're so close to finally seeing, what we've been up against. And then that's where everything changes. The minute you know enough is enough, then you cut the cord and you begin to move on. And then nature and what the planetary system is made of will bring us to a much, much greater experience. There are a lot of great.
Okay, so how do we do this? How do we raise our consciousness? How do we counteract this? It sounds easier said than done. How do we?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, how do we do it?
Yes, I know, it's very much easier said than done, and it's just a constant process, really, because we're bombarded all the time. It's coming through our devices, it's coming through, psyops that really invert a lot of the planetary alignments that happen in order to throw us into survival space and into fear, into reaction. So they know, what this window is all about, and that's why it's been such a focal time of New World Order, because this is the time of the Great Awakening. So everything ramps up on their end as we all move more towards our liberation. So we have to constantly check ourselves and protect ourselves and be very good with what we put in our bodies, detox as much of the heavy metals and things out of our systems. And think of our thought forms and the work that we share with each other. Are we allowing the madness of the world to divide and conquer? Or are we, falling into fear and despair and hopelessness? Are we allowing exhaustion to take over? Are we allowing ourselves to be infected by any level of this, no matter how wicked we are? They are infiltrating every sector of society, including the New Age movements, including this culture, and everywhere. There's plants, there's infiltrators. So the best thing that we can do, that's why I say awakening the truth frequency, because it's not about my truth, it's about awakening all of our truth, living our truth, going through the different growth periods, embracing when our emotions come up in our anger and understanding it, not medicating it, not taking the pharmaceuticals, not allowing our kids to be silenced and repressed, and just really, taking a lot of time to exercise the muscle of intuition, discernment, and connection to our higher self, spending time in nature, using EMF protection and different crystals.
Laura, I got to jump in because we're going to break here at the bottom of the hour, but we'll pick up on this when we come back. Harry Nilsson, everybody's talking, taking us into the break. more of my conversation with Laura Eisenhower and your calls after this time.
Oh, I just did some asking around, and this guy is a sustainability manager and an environmental consultant for Globe Oil. Do you have any idea how wealthy and sadistic those kind of people are? So yeah, please don't let him die. And if we ever needed friends with a stake in the price of gas, it's now.
Tell us what's happening in the news, traffic, or weather with Open Mic in the News 104.5 WOKBN. Sponsored by Magnet Bicycles.